Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Projectworks podcast, a conversation and community for high growth consulting leaders about the stuff that keeps us up at nights. My name is Dominique Rinell. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Projectworks. I am joined by Mark. Hi, Mark, Projectworks
Hello.
CEO. Nice to see you. And also really happy and excited to have David Short, who is the Chief Operations Officer, of Novigi. Now, Novigi, an amazing a company, really exciting to talk about their hyper-growth story. Since launching in 2016, they've scaled to nearly 500 staff across 6 offices, 2 countries, and they've become the fastest growing professional services firm on the AFR Fast 100. Very proud company to work for, I imagine, David. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Yes, definitely proud to be part of it. It's been a great story and happy to talk about it.
I imagine. Do you want to give a little bit of an intro to anyone listening or watching on just expanding on what your role entails, how long you've been with the Novigi team?
Sure. Maybe I'll start just a little on Novigi itself.
Cool.
We're moving so quickly that actually the numbers already that you talked there, Dom, are already out of date.
Already out of date.
And now
Fantastic.
actually 550 people as a result of
Wow.
a recent project we took on, which we're really excited about as well.
Amazing.
So for those of you who haven't had a chance, Novigi is a data technology and increasingly AI partner, primarily to the wealth management and superannuation business in Australia, but also starting now to move more into the broader APAC, and certainly with the next part of our journey, hoping to look more into the US and the UK as well. The nature of what we provide is started, and I'm happy, as sure we'll talk a bit more about the journey, started as a fairly traditional consulting business, taking on complicated data and tech problems. But now we've definitely broadened more into modernization of workplace technology, broader data management solutions, and much more in the managed service space as well. We support a lot of the big superannuation funds and administrators after their core infrastructure. Just very briefly about me. Obviously, you can probably tell from the accent, I'm not a local. So I grew up and spent the early part of my career in the UK in financial services and telco. Been in Australia for 10 very enjoyable years, splitting my time between working inside superannuation, but also for a couple of the big consultancy businesses before finding Novigi. And yeah, definitely no plans to go anywhere else. Loving the journey. So yeah.
Yeah. Australia is a pretty fabulous place to be, and it sounds like you're on a winning team. So I can imagine that the sort of last 10 years of that has been fabulous. I think we've got a poll coming up on the screen for those of you joining us live. I think that should be coming up shortly. Yep, there it is. Perfect. So want to get a bit of a view of what people are here for, what they're most interested to talk about, and why we thought it would be really cool to have David on the podcast is we really wanted to look into really like the COO playbook behind Novigi's hypergrowth. So we want to talk about the Novigi story. We really want to dig into potentially what breaks when you're scaling, what to watch out for. And I want to make some time at the end for some sort of real takeaways around the ops playbook. As people are sort of filling in that poll and giving us a view, Mark, do you want to let us know why you've been, I know we spoke earlier this morning, but why you've been excited to chat to David and talk about Novigi's story?
Yeah, I mean, anytime I get to talk with somebody who's been in the middle of one of these rocket ship growth rides, it's always fascinating. I was lucky enough to have a similar set of growth at Nexient, and it's just such. For me, it from the outside, it looked great, but there were always challenges. There were so many things that we kind of encountered. So I'm always curious to hear about those and how David and the team overcame them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, we've got some results on the poll here, guys. A little bit of an even split, actually, which is quite nice. Really ranking high as managing profitability while you're growing, leadership roles and structures, and what you've learned that doesn't work well. A couple of votes as well for what you've learned that works well and scaling delivery. But I think it really does sing into what you were just saying, really, Mark, about those leadership roles, managing profitability, things breaking when you move fast and try and grow so aggressively. By definition, you're almost not taking a very long time to check that everything's in order to go to that next stage perfectly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig in. We're here to dig into what level of growth demands behind the scenes. So, David, I guess as a bit of a scene setting, hindsight is everything, the benefit of hindsight. Do you want to start by maybe talking through the phases of growth that Novigi's been through?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you touched on your intro. Novigi's still a relatively young business. I mean, 2016, the first phase I would probably describe as just a bit of an exploratory one. So our founder and CEO and chief commercial officer were probably our two key founders. So Ash and Joash, they founded Novigi primarily about, and again, it's probably a really important message, I think, is that we are. Our mission statement is to be a great place to work. So I think that's a really important thing. We talk very passionately and very committedly about that. Secondary to that, we want to be the partner to the wealth and tech and data partner, because we genuinely believe and think we can evidence it through the 10 years we've been in existence that by being a great place to work, we create that differentiator and create the client relationships that mean that we've been able to grow and succeed in the way we have. So yeah, so Joash and Ash basically had got to they had worked together previously in an environment that they didn't feel was a good culture environment to work in, wasn't a great place to work. So they decided that they wanted to test the market and do their own thing. And so the first phase from that kind of 2016 to 2019 was a bit of an exploratory piece. Obviously, two very capable and smart guys, so we found some interesting problems to start solving. But then as we got to the end of 2019, the realization was that there is big opportunities, particularly in that underlying tech and data layer. And so really kind of started to hone in primarily on that. And then so the next phase would be called 4M. 4M was about getting to being a $4 million turnover business, which is really just becoming a viable business so that those guys could pay themselves some sort of sustainable salary and they could start building a team to begin to create some scale. That was the period at which I joined Novigi as we're getting towards the end of that 4M phase, and really started to get some traction with particularly superannuation. There was a pretty decisive concentration at that point and decision to really focus in on superannuation as being a real opportunity area to add value and support the legislation around being value for members. So that aligned very well with our ethical approach and our desire to really make a contribution as well. So yeah, so that's phase two, is get to that 4M. We did that, fairly quickly, 2019-ish. Then beyond that, it was really then the next stage we called 20, 30, 40. So that was about becoming, really, again, aggressive growth, get from 4 to 20 million of turnover, try and ideally aim for about 30% margin on that work and 40% of that revenue being on a recurring basis. Another big realization for us was that continually, feeding the beast in terms of just always being pure consulting works, it's a tough ask. And certainly with superannuation, we identified that being a real opportunity to help lean in and transform, but then also really drive efficiency into running these platforms on behalf of people. And as I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, that was a real kind of game changer for us. So yeah, so we set ourselves that 20, 30, 40, we set ourselves the objective of kind of hitting those numbers in 3 or 4 years was kind of the idea, and see how we go. As seems to have become a bit of a thing, we really, accelerated that pretty quickly. A big decisive moment for us was working with Mercer, one of the big providers of administration, and took on all of their technology platform support, and so brought a team across from Mercer into Novigi, and that really helped with us with scale. But we were also able to redeploy some of that and drive efficiency into that service as well. So yeah, so we ended up hitting that 20, 30, 40 in about 18 months instead of 3 or 4 years. So kind of meant that we had to quickly turn our eyes to what the next prize was going to be. And so phase 4, which we are just coming to an end of now, was 170-10. Obviously picking up a bit of a theme in terms of setting ourselves these kind
I like it. Clear.
So 170-10 was about going from 20 to 100 million of turnover, which is obviously another big ambitious step. 70% of that being recurring. So again, really driving that ongoing annuitized income that allowed us to, be flexible around how we built commercial arrangements, but also have a sustainable and predictable, cash flow and revenue. model. And then 10 was about starting to play a bit more in that actual technology license space. How do we actually provide, I don't think we will ever be an out and out license provider, but we know we have the ability to provide value in terms of through that technology. So again, we set ourselves 3 or 4 year ambition for that. Again, really wanted to expand. So that was achieved through a combination of organic and inorganic growth. We took on a minority partner to support our growth and capitalizing that growth. And again, as you touched on, we've kind of through, I think, hopefully a lot of good judgment and a bit of fortune along the way, we've smashed through that number. We're just literally just about to, by the end of this financial year, I believe we'll be on that run rate of the 100 million. So we'll have to tune in for the next one of these to hear about phase 5, because that's literally what I'm going to discuss with my peers for the next few hours after we finish this up. But excited to get into the next phase of that and see what that looks like.
What an amazing journey. And I love the way you break it down into those clear, which probably not a hard thing to imagine that's why you and the team have potentially been so successful, because you've been very clear on those steps and driving towards it. I know Mark will have some questions around like the growth walls you hit within those phases. But first, I just want to say, I kind of picked up there that were you one of the first, I guess, leaders or executives that came in that wasn't a founder, David?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I saw again briefly on that story. So Joash, and then Melissa, who's the other, there's 4 of us that are exec directors, and now a much broader team of really capable senior leaders have brought in unbelievably talented individuals from different backgrounds. But probably was those 3 really kickstarted it. And then I got the opportunity to work with the 3 of them from the client side, actually. So I was working with one of the super funds, and Novigi did their usually a really good job of coming in and kind of being willing to share some risk with the fund on a piece of work. And so came in and did that. And I worked closely with particularly Ash and Joash, and just immediately could see the capability, but also loved the approach, loved the style that they had, that was very non-traditional consultancy, much more willing to share risk with the client than a traditional kind of T&M type arrangement. And that really appealed to me and to the fund. And so, that started our conversation. And not long after that, decided to come in. So, and a part of that was obviously, these guys are incredibly talented and entrepreneurial. My background is a bit more in that bigger operational space. And so a realization, I think, that, like any good team, we need a combination of skills and experiences in there. And so my secret sauce was about helping try and bring the right degree of kind of rigor and support without losing the flexibility and the agility that had made Novigi get to the point it got to. And so, that's definitely been a bit of theme. I'm sure we'll come back to, of that, getting that right balance between, a phrase I love is putting the right friction in the system. It's not, people talk a lot about frictionless, which in some situations is fine, but in other situations means that you don't have the controls over it. So I think for me, I love that phrase of putting the right degree of friction in there. Don't stifle the innovation, don't stifle the ability to be entrepreneurial and creative around the way we do deals, but also make sure that we can safely scale as we started to get bigger. And I think we've done a solid job of that.
Oh, I love that. Now I can see some questions coming up, and I want to get to those as well. But first of all, I just wanted to get Mark's thoughts or any questions around those phases that David was talking about. Do they sound familiar to you, or is there a particular one that you would like to dig into?
They do. So congratulations, amazing journey. They do sound familiar. I was going to ask, I think of when you make these shifts, like from your chapter 2 to chapter 3 or 3 to 4, you ultimately realize you need different process and different team structure. So I'm curious, how proactive or reactive were you? Like, so when you guys were like, we're definitely going from 2 to 3, did you flip the process, flip the team, or did you wait until you got into it and then
No, it's a great question, Mark. And very, very deliberate, to be honest. I think that's one of the key themes that I would certainly want to share as being something I think that's worked really well for us. Is as we've done each of these, we've started to think about the end of that next phase. What do we need to look like at the end of that next phase to be fit for purpose and to be able to cope with that? So we've tried to be really deliberate and proactive around saying, let's it sounds a bit cliche, but invest ahead of the curve on this. Think about what we need to look like at that stage, and if that means that we need to make some changes and perhaps over-index. My being a golfer and Ash being a golfer, we talk a lot about over clubbing. So it's take that bit extra so that you know that you've got that capacity to grow into it and be clear. So yeah, we've had Tom target operating model pieces. Tom 1, 2, and 3 have been the key things that we've done along those. Ironically, we're just talking about it yesterday, that actually even since Tom 3, which is the one to go into the 170-10 phase of that, we reckon that there's been ideations on that to the extent that we're at Tom 3.11, I think now. So it's that's probably the other bit of yes. Be deliberate, think ahead as to what we want that to look like, but don't be scared to make adjustments to that as you go along. I think again that's that ability and willingness to flex and again sounds a bit cliche, but not fail. I don't think we've failed, but be willing to realize that that's maybe not quite the right answer, and make adjustments as you go pretty quickly. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't know if people are aware, but it's just to me, it's really rare to see a company be that intentional, plan ahead, and deliver the business development side. So I've seen a lot of companies plan this complicated world they're going to live in once they hit 100 million or whatever the number is, and then they don't hit 100 million because their world's too complicated. So I think it's really impressive to get the model in place to scale, but then also actually deliver the revenue to hit the scale. It's hard to do. So yeah, really cool.
Thanks.
There's a question that leans in that's been asked here that leans into that a little bit more. The question is, at the 20 mil stage, you talked about a 30% margin. At 100 mil target, what was the margin target? And I think maybe digging into that, as you grew, how did you, were there moments across there? I mean, you could talk about that if you want to, but it's sort of like were there moments where you're like, we can't run the business anymore? It's not like copy and paste, just get bigger, kind of leaning into what Mark said there, like operationally, or your expectations around projects, trade-offs you made around that growth?
Yeah, I think I'll obviously be a little bit evasive on exact numbers, but in terms of, that's a great question. And definitely the expectation was to maintain that margin as we go along. We've been very deliberate as a business and as an ownership group to really want to invest in growth, and so there's been a lot of reinvestment. We've never been a business that hasn't been very cash positive, but we've also been very willing and able, and it's been our secret sauce of putting a lot of that back in to fund that growth, and give us the ability to take that next step, whether that's through just internal investment ahead of the curve, or whether that is actual M&A or investment in businesses. Again, one of the things I think particularly, and Ash and Joash have done incredibly well, has been very creative about the way that we have done deals with clients, being willing to lean into, as I say, sharing risk, but also doing arrangements that work for both parties over a long period of time. So there's real trust and partnership in there. And so using our ability to deploy capital effectively to be able to do deals that work for both sides.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, because there's another question here. It says, can you share more about the risks you shared with clients, like leaning into that? Did you have some really long-term customers that have come on this journey?
Yeah, definitely. And so it's, I think one of the secret sauces for us, and obviously having come from Big Four environments, that traditional model of just T&M daily rate stuff, okay, it's fine and it works in a lot of situations, but it's what we like to try and do with clients is say, look, let's work on what is the outcome we want to achieve here? How do we get to an arrangement that is a good thing for both of us? And how do we share risk in terms of saying, look, we will create an arrangement by which we will commit to an outcome for a structure of a commercial deal, and then if that goes one way or the other, then we'll have arrangements to be able to share that. And so if we struggle or get it wrong, that means we may have to swallow something. Equally, if there's an upside for us, if we can deliver that really well and effectively, then great. So it's a higher, I would definitely class as having a higher risk tolerance than a lot of businesses out there and the willingness to do that. But for me, all that creates is a real trust with the client that we're both on the same page and we're both genuinely trying to get the same outcome. But also just, drives creation, collaboration. Our three values are collaboration, innovation, and banter. And collaboration and innovation are obviously very much at the heart of how do we make sure these things work. And banter is probably a slightly different, type of a value to have, but it goes back to that great place to work. We want to be, not take ourselves too seriously. We also want to be able to have really authentic conversations, with each other, but also with the clients. And hence back to this bit of, look, there's a bit of risk in this for both of us, but are we on the same page? Are we both out to win? So yeah.
I love that. I love banter being a value. It's such a playful word as well. It's quite Aussie.
Yeah, and as we were chatting about before we came on, I've been having it already from my CEO and guys sitting outside this room who've been looking. So yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
It's great. And it makes
it
genuinely makes it a great place to work. And you do want to come and spend time with the guys you work with, and
I agree. I think especially with consulting and services, it's people. That's what you're working with. People working with other people, so it's really important to have really invested team members. Now I want to. Oh, sorry, you finished, David?
No, I was just going to make one more comment. It just makes it easier. Everyone knows that consulting has its ups and downs in terms of kind of moments of real, needing to dig in, and other moments where there's a bit of slack water. So it makes it easier to cope with those things and have the goodwill for that. If you look after people and they enjoy what they're doing. So
yeah, I agree. I think that's a nice point. I want to move a little bit around. Obviously, your title has operations in it. That is your focus, COO. Talking about what can potentially break when you're scaling, because you hear the story, incredible success, and obviously you introed that in sort of a minute and a half. So it sounds very breezy, and there would have been a lot of work behind that. Mark was already asking questions about, do you set up first or wait for it to come? I guess, what are the kind of problems that you really, as an operator in your role, that you felt like you could see before others, or in a slightly similar, different line, like what did you have to rebuild sooner than you thought along that journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think things, for me, signs you can see are often around kind of that tension in the humans is one of the things. And again, without product punting, that's one of the things that Projectworks has been really helpful to us about being able to see that, because one of the things that we spend a lot of time and find is, again, a real differentiator is being able to understand the load going through people and the relative, obviously utilization is always a metric that's going to exist in a consulting world, but using that more as a heat map indicator of which areas of the business are feeling strain and which ones maybe have that bit of space, but also being able to plan forward. That's the other thing that's really important to us. A key metric that I am very passionate about is, we call it resourced versus actual. So what did we plan that we thought we were going to need to do in order to meet client expectations against what actually happened? For me, that's an incredibly valuable piece of saying, how well are we understanding the propositions? How well are we planning for those? How well are we estimating effort and resource requirements? But also help leaning in on productivity and understanding how the guys are going with getting through the work. So that's definitely the people aspect of it. The tooling and the pressure that gets put on the platforms as well, another key thing. And again, happy to call out that one of the things we chatted to Projectworks about was, as we were scaling, we were the number of people in there, the amount of data that was starting to put some pressure on the platform, and Mark and the guys responded really quickly and well to that, of helping us, being able to deal with that latency and things. So yeah, it's part of that scaling process. And then ways of working is the other thing. Obviously, we went from, when I first joined, we probably have, 8 or 10 consecutive engagements going on at any given time. And when I looked at the thing yesterday, we had 120 active engagements at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's how do you just keep the right friction in the system of making sure that we're confident and comfortable as to how those are going, that we're supporting the people, and we understand if there's anything in there that we need to help the guys with. So
yeah, and I really like that. sort of line, because it's really nice to hear. It's like, yes, we want to build a place where people, have banter and like working here and invested in their projects. But there is a reality behind that, consultancies, you can see people getting burnt out, like having a real view of how people are being utilized, what are the best projects they're on, having visibility across that. When you're in a smaller organization, you can feel that a little bit. You can see the people across the desk. As soon as you reach a size, which I would say is even anything over 20, it's very objective on how busy someone is and comparable across there, and how do you like manage through that. I know, Mark, you probably would have had your own thoughts and challenges around that, growing a consultancy.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I wanted to drill into a little bit, if you're open to it, is some of what you're putting at risk, because I think that's a fascinating area. Everybody would ask me about that, and there was very few that actually did it. So let me give you an example of how we thought about it, and then I'm curious, I don't know if you can share this level of detail or not, but we would target a 37.5% account margin. So we sort of had this goal. We would look at a project and say, at that margin, it'd be about, X dollars. We would take 10% off and come up with some measurable thing. Like, so for us developing software, it might be we'll build an app, it'll get 4 stars or better from 100 reviews. And if we do that, we get 15% back. So we could actually make a little more, but we could also lose 10%. So I'm curious, I don't know what you're able to share, but like,
yeah, it's not a dissimilar thing, Mark. I think what we try and look at it is look at it holistically across the whole business and accept that sometimes we'll win and sometimes we might have to just swallow a little bit. But that again, as long as we manage that well and are continuously learning from the experience we're going through, we found it drives such high trust and loyalty with the clients that they're willing to absolutely engage. And the number of clients who come and say, look, we can see this has proved more difficult than we expected it to. We don't expect you to necessarily be able to do all of those bits for what we initially talked about. So let's work out together, how do we do that? So what we also try and do, again, without getting too specific, is we try and almost decouple the commercial arrangement from the delivery expectation. So what we accept is that there will be some deals where for strategic value, the margin is not going to be the same in the short term, but the value to us of getting in, showing that what we can do with these clients to then, win the long-term arrangements, particularly in that managed service space, is hugely valuable for us. So we focus very hard on lifetime value of engagements. And again, it's that willingness to look medium and long-term, and having the capital to be able to structure those deals in a way that allows us to think long term and not have to focus on just month by month, quarter by quarter. So we talk a lot about, yes, absolutely, we concentrate on margin, but we also then work very hard to say, well, look, from a delivery perspective, let's understand and estimate what we think we need to do in terms of resourcing and cost to deliver the outcome, and manage very much to that number. And whatever the margin was planned to be, we'll have good commercial reasoning behind whether that's 50% or 15%, but we really focus on delivering to what we expect. And obviously then if we can outperform that, it all contributes towards margin. If in some situations we don't, then great. We really concentrate, and Ash, our CEO, talks a lot about it's the collective, margin across the whole business and all the different bits of business in that matter. Individual ones, yes, everyone has their own desire and pride to drive that, but ultimately it's the collective number that matters.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And interesting, I've got a question here to talk to you about metrics that matter. You obviously mentioned margin a lot. Not a big surprise. It's a very important metric that matters in a consulting organization. But there's also a question here that I thought might be interesting to sort of really tangibly talk about how that operates. Someone said, how often do you check reports? This person actually specifically said check reports in Projectworks. So I assume they're using projects as well to assess where you need to make adjustments, and how do you ensure accuracy of forecasting and good habits? But, just in general, I guess 2 parts here, like what are the metrics that you think in your mind matter, and how do you really day to day make sure that they're top of mind, week to week, that each people are focused on their right bits, I guess, across the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So maybe start a bit bottom up, obviously top down. I think everybody knows the kind of traditional, gross profit, EBITDA, operating profits will all obviously be important ones. The biggest metrics for us are our happiness index is the number one, which is about that great place to work piece, and
cool.
getting that. So that's an extremely important thing. We really pride ourselves on the accreditations about being a great place to work, both here in Australia and for our team who are based in Sri Lanka. And we've consistently had that accreditation for years. So that metric is really important to us. Obviously, utilization doesn't go away. But I really emphasize inside our business, utilization is not an individual target. I'm not about trying to get David to hit a certain number. We use that as a modeling thing. We use it as a temperature check of have we got the right amount and are we getting the right balance? And I've made it very clear, if we're sitting at 95, 100% utilization, we're not doing our jobs well, because that's not creating space for those individuals to keep themselves developing and getting some variety. But clearly, if 50, 60% isn't an ideal either for the individuals or for the business as a whole. So how do we get that right balance that allows great? Obviously, we want to be able to deliver at good margins, but at the same time, we want to be really clear on giving people some space to develop and explore other things. So yeah, obviously pretty traditional. I've touched on this resource versus actual. That's a really key thing for us that we found has been a real differentiator of trying again in this spirit of being really proactive and looking forward. It's saying, well, what do we believe is the requirements and the amount we're going to need, the type of people, the amount of money and time we have to spend on these things, and how well are we doing, how accurate are we at that planning process, how do we keep iterating that? So that's a really important one for us. And then we call it VE, is a really key metric for us, which is variance to estimate. So that bit I touched on there of saying, we want to kind of understand what we think is going to be required, and let's track that really. So if it's, if that's blowing out, how do we lean in and support that? Do we understand if that's a tooling and methodology thing, or if it's an estimation thing? And clearly, if we're well under, then it's again understanding what do we do really well, how do we translate that into the next engagement and the next planning session,
which must play really strongly, David, into client satisfaction and recurring revenue from customers. Like I was thinking that consultancies, it's often like winning projects, and so that keeping how you work with customers. And a basic one is, if you said it's going to be this much and the job stays the same and the environment stays the same, how accurate are you across that? How much the confidence that clients can have with you that this is what we're planning to deliver, how we're planning to deliver it, consistency and delivery.
Absolutely. And I think for me that was a learn I had back in the UK. I used to work for a business back in the UK that helped businesses with their sales effectiveness, and we would talk to them about, look, we're absolutely willing to base our fee on what we can do in terms of helping you improve the numbers, and we'll take that as a percentage. And almost always the clients didn't want to do that, because they went, shit, actually, if you can do, excuse my language, if they can do that, then that's going to cost us a lot more. But it's that willingness to say, we believe that we can do this for you, and we're willing to really properly partner with you to achieve that, and you as a business having the willingness to take that risk as well and go, some of these are going to win, some of them are going to lose, but as long as you've got the right tolerances in place and the right planning in place, then you keep adjusting that and making sure that you are.
And visibility, right? Because that's like ahead of time before it's like how
100%. So
to
specifically answer the question about how often, daily. I literally, I and my team look at the stuff daily, and then we have a robust governance process around how each engagement will kind of reflect on that, and then we have planning sessions with the people who head up each of these areas on a fortnightly basis to look at the aggregate situation and what that means for the next week, month, quarter.
Yeah, that's so good. And interesting, another sort of thread to pull at that is there's been a couple of questions about mergers and acquisitions. I think you said in your intro that you did bring a team in to help in one of your phases of growth. How did that sort of, I guess, insights around that? You've got this strong operational your team running, you've got this very strong culture that you obviously invest strongly in as an exec in a company. How did that work for you, bringing in another team?
Sorry, I'd only really touched on the first one, but we've had, I think, 6 iterations of that. Wow. And I think it's probably important to emphasize that they're not all traditional M&As. They weren't actually us necessarily buying a business. What we have found works really well for us and for our clients has been, look, that are, you know, traditionally, particularly in the superannuation world, there's been lots of internal teams running functions that really the business doesn't want or need to do. You know, and one of the key themes that we've spoken to lots of clients since the start of Novigi has been this idea of creating decentralization and interoperability. We talk a lot about saying, look, pick the things that you want to really own and be good at, and get rid of the things that you don't. So, you know, superannuation funds really become the product manufacturer, the owner of the relationship with the actual members and employers. But, you know, running the registry platforms, running the digital platforms, they don't want or need to do that stuff. So what we've done in a number of occasions is worked with clients to say, look, you know, we'll provide you that service, but let, you know, the people who have done that, bring them into a technology business so that they can be in amongst other technologists, but also we can start really getting some economies of scale and, you know, best practices for you in there. So it's been a great, again, another part of this risk sharing and proper win-win has been that, you know, we've brought in teams from you know 3 or 4 other companies, moved them into our business, been able to quite quickly realize some efficiencies in there by the sharing of best practices and that economies of scale piece, create opportunities for those individuals to broaden their horizons and get involved in other things, and yet, you know, provide the service as well, if not better, back to the client for less money, and we can redeploy that effort into other things. So it's been a fantastic model and worked really, really well for us. And we've, again, a bit of a secret sauce thing for us that I'd certainly recommend strongly for anyone with this type of approach has been, don't let that team sit separate for much, if any, time. You know, we've been very deliberate about saying, once they come in, land them safe, make sure that they feel comfortable, and but then pretty quickly get them fully integrated into the business. You know, there's a lot.
They're not their own brand. They're part of the Novigi team from day one.
And I'm sure we've all seen that, and it's been certainly been a thing in superannuation in Australia, has been this, you know, merger of businesses, but ultimately they might all have the same logo, but they're really still operating as independent businesses. So we've really tried to avoid that, and that's been great from a shared best practice and economies of scale thing, but also just a cultural piece as well. You know, really, we don't want people to be feeling that they're sitting isolated from that. And, you know, with bringing people in from various backgrounds, it really helps them immerse themselves in the Novigi ways of working.
Yeah, I love that. I can totally imagine. I imagine, what did you say, 6 times? I think you'd be pros at that now. You could write it. You could write a book.
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah, I think we're pretty good. You know, Melissa, our deputy CEO, is an absolute gun at these things, and I think we've got that down pretty. And it's genuinely been a good thing, not just for the people coming in, but for the original Novigi people as well. Because for each time we've done that, we've ended up iterating the employee value proposition as well.
Yeah, right.
As you bring people in, they go, well, there's this benefit that they bring, and oh, that's a good idea. So again, really tried to invest in that culture through EVP and say, well, great, you know, so we've introduced long weekend leave so people can, you know, take an extra, you know, 2 or 3 days every 6 months to just extend their weekends and have a bit more of a catch up. We have Novigi, we call it, which is a kind of health and well-being thing, the subsidy that you can you know, use a bit of money to go and do, and it doesn't have to be a gym. It can be anything related to kind of just general health, whether that's, you know, physical or mental, and let people to do that. So we really do believe that we've got a, you know, both a culture and a value proposition that makes it exciting for people to come and work and stay. And that's definitely demonstrated in our churn. We've had very, very low levels of churn, even with people, you know, shifting companies, shifting cultures. So
it's so cool, David. I love that. I love the idea of you know, from the very beginning of our conversation, this essentially incredible growth has had this full foundation of being a great place to work. I think that's so cool.
And growing safely is a big theme. You know, we've talked a lot about it at a board level. You know, it's interesting that even our clients, you know, constantly have raised it with us of, geez, you guys are going so fast. Can you cope with all of that? Can you do it safely? And so, again, the answer has been, and the reassurance being able to offer is that really proactive thinking ahead of going, absolutely. And this is what we're thinking about it. We're thinking about what this needs to look like. We're investing in that ahead of the curve. We're really over-indexing on how we bring in and support the individuals, but also the clients. We have a dedicated and extremely effective client partnership group who look after our client relationships and make sure that they are, very, very understanding what's going on and have really strong comms.
Yeah, I like that, head of the curve. Now, Mark, I know we've only got, can you believe it? I feel this has gone so fast. We've only sort of got 5 minutes left. I wanted to give you a chance to pull at any threads that David was talking about. I know you'll probably have a bunch of thoughts in this short period of time.
Yeah, well, I think again the foundation you guys set as we want to be the best place to work, I think is just phenomenal. And I think that just listening to you talk about all these other pieces that you're doing so well, I haven't seen very many firms do acquisitions well. It almost always falls apart. And I was trying to like pull out like what makes that work. I think it is that foundation of we want to be a great place to work and we're going to integrate you quickly. I've seen the opposite, where it wasn't necessarily a great place to work, and we're going to let you sit separate for a year, and then we're going to bring you in, and it just sort of, yeah, it just sort of feels like it breaks. So I'm curious if you have any other parts of your M&A playbook, if that's the key, or if there are other things that really drive it, because it's not easy to do.
Yeah, it's obviously, and again, this is probably not a revelation to anyone, but it's making sure that what you add adds a new capability, but at the same time is close enough aligned with what you do. Cultural fit. Again, it sounds a bit cliche, but it's incredibly important. We recently acquired an AI business. It's obviously at the front of everybody's minds, including ours, as to how we best apply it and support our clients with it. And that was, it's a field that is evolving and changing so fast that you could argue that there's, that any IP you buy in immediately almost becomes redundant because it's the next thing, but moving on. But the group we brought in, we think is an incredibly good cultural fit for what we do, but also we can see immediately the opportunity to multiply that capability across our broader business, both in terms of revenue opportunities, but also that cost to serve part of things as well. How do you drive internal both tooling and augmentation of the workforce to be able to deliver that more effectively and get to the point where we want to be in a business that's another 2 or 3 times our current one, but doesn't necessarily reflect the same growth in human headcount as well, because that we can start really helping increase that size and capability.
Yeah, so when you bring in an M&A opportunity, it sounds like sometimes they're actually like a part of another company. It's not a whole
Correct. Yeah, it's been a combination of
firm.
both of those, Mark. Yeah, as I say, it's been something we've, again, I think been pretty smart about, is identifying that the market we operate in, they want to evolve their operating models. They want to change the way they're working. And so there are genuine win-win opportunities for businesses out there who want to reduce their OpEx, reduce their headcount, in areas where we think we can actually take on those complex problems and solve them more effectively, because we've done it before, and B, we're good at it, and we bring that size and scale. So yeah, it's one of our, it definitely feels like it's been one of our secret sauce things of saying, there's genuinely an opportunity for both sides to win here, and we can keep a lot of people employed and use their skills to broaden their horizons and provide more.
Yeah, I can imagine for the employees of those groups, it's a real win-win as well, because they're sort of going from wondering if their group might or might not make it to suddenly they're now part of your team and they're actually a client-facing group and they're becoming kind of part of the core, right? So
and and let's face it, technologists like to generally be around technologists. So
yeah,
you bring them together with a group of incredibly smart, talented, varied people in Novigi, and they get a chance to play off each other. That's fantastic. I think we've all been in situations where our function sits in amongst a bunch of different capabilities, and it's harder to feel that connection. So yeah, we've got an incredible group of 550. Well, apart from me, probably there's some unbelievable technologists in there. So I certainly wouldn't class myself in the same bracket as most of these guys, but yeah, it's makes it, hopefully, as I say again, a great place to work, because people are in amongst people of their own ilk.
Love that. And look, we're nearly at the end of our time. We've got one more question on margin here for you, David. It says, David, the Wallabies are playing Scotland in November 2026. Who wins and by what margin?
So for those of you who you pick up from the accent, I'm also a passionate rugby guy, which I know is a kind of slightly minority thing here in Australia, and I'm still definitely a Scottish fan rather than a Wallaby, although I will definitely support the Wallabies in almost every game except the ones against Scotland.
Exactly right.
I'm pretty scarred by the World Cup from 2016 when the Wallabies beat Scotland thanks to very poor refereeing decisions. So I'm a bit scarred by that, to be honest. So
bad operations going on there.
We'll go for an honourable draw between the Wallabies and Scotland. I'll sit very much with my butt on.
Smart move, since I think you're sitting in your Sydney office and about to walk out to the cruise. So I think Absolutely. That was a very safe thing. David, thank you so much for joining us. So great to hear about your growth, just incredible. And I just loved, I kind of touched on it there, but I just loved the whole theme of being a great place to work. And I can just imagine that came across on so many levels, like not only caring about your people, but also really running a really well-oiled operational machine so people can feel really safe in what they're doing and how they serve their customers. Chaos in an organization, or even just confusion on a light level can really cause people to take a step back and not go really strongly and confidently into what they're doing. So I just think you had so many fantastic messages there about keeping your people safe and supported and confident. And I think that's really very, very cool. And obviously if you've got a great crew there. So wishing you all the best. Look forward to seeing what you guys, Novigi, brings next.
Appreciate the invite and being great to chat. And hopefully people have picked up a few things they can take away and use.
I'm sure we've had a bunch of questions, so it's very cool. So thank you again. You can find David, Mark, or myself on LinkedIn, and please make sure you subscribe to the Projectworks podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and we're going to be back in 2 weeks with the Projectworks COO, Doug Taylor. We're going to discuss his early days of building his consulting firm, Provoke, and we're going to talk about the lessons he learned that has shaped the book that him and Mark have produced, The 50 Million Consulting Firm. Thank you again, David. Lovely to see you, Mark. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
David.